Just so everyone knows, we will be recording, and we ask that everyone mutes their mics and turns off their cameras during the duration so that there are no, well, keep it. Okay, and I will begin. So welcome to our October or September still open council meeting. Quick overview. This meeting is open to all members in good standing. This is a working council meeting, so we are following a tight agenda, and comments or chats from the membership should be reserved until the open forum period at the end, after we get through our council business. And during the open forum, time will be set aside for members to make comments, but due to time limitations, the amount each member can speak might be limited. And if there's anything else that anyone wants to follow up on or any other questions or comments, you are always free to email the council at council@kingstonfoodcoop.com. And we will post those questions and answers afterwards as well. And at the end of the meeting, there is an executive session, which is a closed session that only consists of council members to discuss any important or sensitive matters that are pertaining to the co-op. So our first order of business is co-op updates. So I believe Siobhan will share our membership numbers and upcoming membership events.
Cool, thank you, Kendall. Our membership total is currently at 1,272 members, and our total within that 1,272 is 239 solidarity members, which is a pretty big jump up from where we were the last couple months. Kevius and I attended the African American Heritage or just African American Festival a couple weeks ago, and we had a bunch of new solidarity members join, which was really exciting, and also just super fun to be there and talk about the co-op with the community and meet some members who I haven't met yet, and also welcome a bunch of new ones. So that was really fun. And just this past weekend, we had our first community building design workshop in conjunction with Mass Design Group, who are our architects that are going to be helping design the building. And I really enjoyed myself. I think our members did as well. And so basically our members were able to play with like a big blow up of the site plan, and like arrange different, sorry, the cat is like trying to take over. Our members were able to play with the site plan and like potential programming that we could have in and out of the space, and like share their kind of thought process behind how or why they would arrange our building that way. And also our members got to, and community members, because I believe that some people who were there just dropped in, and they were able to vote on the programming that they want us to prioritize, in terms of like sustainability programming, indoor and outdoor spaces. And there was one more category that I just can't remember the name of, but that was really cool to see like what's most popular among the community and what the community wants to see. And I am thinking about ways that we can make this sort of activity, this interactive activity, virtual, because I know that there were some people who wanted to attend in person that weren't able to. And I think that, this is something that we can still gather feedback and ideas with, that people can do on their own time and would be really valuable for our building design. So I'm going to pass it back to you, Kendall. There are no upcoming like in-person events for the rest of this month, but in case anything changes, we will of course share it out via email and on social media. So yeah, thanks, Kendall. Passing it back to you.
Thank you, Siobhan. And I will pass it to Ali, our treasurer, for our financial reports.
Yeah, hey everyone. Let me know if my microphone's okay. I've been playing with different things here, but as I pull up this document of the finances, I'm seeing comment to share. Can someone?
Yeah, Ali, I'm actually working on copying and pasting it right now.
Okay. All right. 1 second. I had this document here, and then I had to restart. One second. Well, thing here is Q4 entering it. There's been a new grant request from the GWI. They hold on to the funds that that we have to request for access and use. That grant request has been made now, so that it could land on a yeah.
I think you're breaking up. Can you just repeat that?
Yeah, the Q4 grant request has been made already to GWI, so that it could land on October 1st and October 2nd. The amount approximately that, again, is part of the larger pot that we've been given. The current amount that we have, it's under 30K. Again, the specific notes of where I have the specific number, it's in the document that I can't find right now, but it's under 30K once.
I don't know if it's just me, but Ali, I can't hear you. You've been breaking up. So maybe we return back to this and go through the other updates first.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay. So we will continue on with our other council committee updates.
Cool. Lindsay's not here, so I can jump into governance. So over the last month, we've been planning for the member handbook, which will be built out in early 2023. We've been working on council assessments and providing feedback to each other. We've been doing quarterly planning for the committee, what needs to be happening in the next quarter, as well as a lot of our time has been focused on line by line revision of the bylaws, reviewing it and seeing what needs to be updated to get the store ready to for store opening. We've also been planning for policy governance education and developing that. And so in terms of the next reporting period, our goal is to complete bylaws revision, which will be followed by 3 staggered rounds of review. We will also be developing a document that very clearly illustrates what proposed changes there are. So this will be shared with the council as well as with all the members so that they can vote on that. We will sign a retainer contract with a lawyer who, so that will be happening as well. Our plan is to finish the policy register, as well as identify a facilitator for strategic planning and developing end statements, which is a part of building a part of policy governance. We have been doing work on the decision-making structure, and so just capturing that in a high-level overview in a one-pager, that's one of the goals. And then also determining what trainings need to be ongoing for council members to do their work effectively. Hand it over to you, Kendall, for community integration.
Yep, thank you, Nina. So since our last meeting, we held this Design Your Co-op event in partnership with Mass. I wasn't able to be there, unfortunately, but I heard it went really well during the event, and it fostered a lot of engagement, which is awesome. And we interviewed 2 candidates for branding support because one of our Q3 goals was to launch a rebranding, or at least start to work out a rebranding process. And we have quite a few of our Q3 goals that have already been reached. So I listed them here, and Siobhan kind of touched on it a little bit: increasing the membership, increasing our solidarity members, developing our quarterly member events, which it was what that last event was, increasing Instagram engagement, and increasing email open rate. So all those things were accomplished, which we're excited about. And going into our next reporting period, we'll be setting our Q4 goals, finishing the collection of more data for our market study, and hopefully we'll be beginning co-op office hours and our member ambassador program. But we are working on that and it's in development. And in terms of expenditures, we had the designer co-op event and new brochures that were created in order to update our printed materials to be more present. And Siobhan, I believe, is going to share some more about designer co-op event, unless, I don't know if you have more to share. We talked about it, right?
No.
Okay.
I only was prepared to do like the recap. I think that the designer co-op workshop is something that we could potentially host again, or like I said, thinking about a virtual version. And, you know, it's something that could potentially happen again if Mass decides that they want to gather some more data or feedback. But as far as like more updates, I do not have any. Sorry, Kendall.
No, that's fine. It was just on here, but I think you already did your recap, so sorry about that. And I'll pass it on to Kivius.
Beautiful. Thank you. So development and programming, some fun things that have happened this period. We've updated the programs following partnership conversations. One unsuspecting partner that we ended up pulling was UCAT and the Ulster County Department of Economic Innovation, where they're donating all sorts of things, such as like buses for us to deliver meals directly to neighborhoods that can't get them. A basic basket program in partnership with Trust Hub. There's just so many just fun things have emerged that I didn't expect. And a lot that sort of like landed in our lap, which is super fun. I can't wait for us to talk about it a bit more. And so, yeah, we updated the programs following those conversations, those initial round of conversations. I had a couple more this week that I need to upload later this week. And we completed the performas for the and these programs are for the future, right? So we're just testing them out right now just to see how much weight we'll have to pull in order to make them come to life. And of course, vote to see sort of like which programs fit with the co-op and which don't, which the event help with. And we completed the performance for the small, medium A, and medium B schemes. So there are 4 different sizes of co-ops that we're going to present to Novo at the end of this pre-design phase. One is just a small one that's just a grocery, to the medium one, which has some more program in different type of ways, like a 1-story edition versus going back a bit. And a large one, which has everything. And so our amazing Proforma developer has been working with me, and Sonia has been filling in also behind the scenes on just trying to figure out how the Proformas look for those schemes. And thus far, we have the small, medium A, and medium B. And the goals for the next reporting period is we will run staff.
May I ask a quick question?
Mm-hmm.
I was just curious to hear about how the Proforma development relates to the schematic design that the architects are doing. Like, is there conversation between the Proforma developer and then what the architects are beginning the process of designing?
100%, yeah. So before we move forward in the next chapter of it, we have to, like, Novo's our funder, so we touch base with Novo and we look at the pros and cons of every single one. Of course, we come up with recommendations based on the result of everyone, but what the architects are looking at in schematic design is a particular piece of Firebrand, for example. They're specifically looking at how the operations flow. In order for them to know how the operations flow, they need budget projections and they need to see it laid out in the space. So in order for them to develop an operation scheme during schematic design, they need this information. And they're working with the architects right now because some of this, it has a lot of design implications, whether or not we go with certain programs and what that looks like. So yeah, I hope that answered the question. If not, feel free to ask more. Okay, cool. And so, see you, Siobhan. Thank you for coming. And so the next goal is along this is we will start shooting out projections of like staff and infrastructure projections for the programming so that we have a nice range to fit within for Firebrand to then feed off of and make a bit more concrete. And then Sonia developed this really cool partnership roadmap, which basically sort of like aligns us that we could check in every quarter to make sure we're on. And so I complete the partnership roadmaps as soon as we finalize all the programming. Also complete the large pro forma scheme and finalize the programs. So all of that is to be done before the next reporting period, because that's when we hand it off to a Firebrand and the architects and everyone to start, doing strategic plans on getting it there. Ali, and sorry, really quick before we jump to Ali. The pro forma development is 2.5K. That was the initial, that was what was due at signing. We have another 2.5K due to her for developing the pro forma schemes. And then the survey analysis, since that's inside of the building and development, the development and programming committee, the folks who are doing analysis, that's about how much it will cost. Ali, you had a question?
Yeah, and let me know if the audio is better or not. But so on the schematic stuff, I'm a little less scratching my head a little bit, and what prompted this, hiring of a new developer consultant to come up with 4 different presentations of the project. Like, what is I understand, what you mentioned, but like what prompted, what was like, oh no, shoot, we gotta pivot, we gotta come up with different scenarios because this could possibly, or what's going on?
Yeah, so basically there are so many ways to skin a cat, and that's a horrible analogy, but there's so many different types of co-ops that we can produce, right? It could be bare bones, strictly retail. It could go all the way up to every program that we can imagine possibly that, increases folks' relationship to food. However, it's also bound by budget, right? We only have so much that we could play within. And so Novo was basically like, hey, dedicated for this project, we think that it will cost about this much. So we're like, well, how about we produce 4 schemes, starting small, the lowest price point that it could be, to the largest, which is the highest price point that could be. We analyze the pros and cons, and we listen to the community, and they could help us point a direction towards a scheme that works for us. Because if it's too low, you run the risk of not meeting the needs. If it's too high, you could run the risk of having this fancy sort of like infrastructure here that is way too much for Kingston. Or maybe that's what's needed, or maybe a smaller one is needed, or in the middle was what's needed. No one knows yet. So this allows us to be flexible. And as we get more input from the community, we can say like, oh, actually medium A is what everyone is gravitating towards. So we really want to push down that route. And so after we develop these 4 schemes and get a lot of this input, we synthesize them to point us in a direction around which to develop in. And each one comes with their own projections of how much it will cost to develop in that area and how much it'll cost to operate in that area. So we could give Novo, our funder, information right off the bat. This is how much it'll cost. This is how much operations be. So everyone's expectations are very clear.
So it sounds like even this is like a pretty standard part of the process.
Yeah.
And so hopefully also having those versions will allow us to get input on something that's a little bit more tangible and specific. And then we can also, if we're hearing a lot of excitement and enthusiasm towards a particular kind, we can also be advocating for that because we actually have a plan built out, backed up by an analysis and numbers. Is that right?
100%.
Okay.
Ali, you're going to say something else? I can't hear a thing. Sorry. Oh, okay. All right.
Okay, cool. Store leadership. So this section is going to be a little longer than usual because the store leadership committee Three of our large committee are here today to support in doing a presentation. But basically over the last month, we were able to do a few more informational interviews. We did the second and third session of the shared leadership workshop, which was for council members, but also for all store leadership committee members as part of their research. We did a write-up of summary of research and recommendations to the council. And now we're going to do a presentation that's similar, basically the same content as what was written, but just presenting it. And then we'll have some space to talk about it as well. Who's managing the Zoom? Can you give, Brad, are you down to share your screen? And are you down to share your screen?
Yeah, I'm good. I can do
Okay.
that if I have permission.
Is Sonia here to share that?
You do have permission, Brad, so just let me know if it doesn't work. Oh, there you go.
Okay. All right, I'm going to put it on slideshow mode. Hopefully everyone can see it.
Looks good.
Yes.
Okay. Well, great to be able to present this to everybody. I just wanted to make sure I knew who was here. I see two Kingston Food Co-op symbols, so I don't know everybody. Can the people who are
Sonia, our operations consultant. I think there should just be one Kingston Food Co-op on here.
okay? Yeah, there's only one. There used to be two, right? Okay. So
Yes, it's just me.
okay. All right. Hi, Sonia. Okay, so yeah, we're going to present this. Different people are going to present different parts of it, and I'll be presenting the first part. If there are any questions, we definitely want to have a discussion. But you can also, I think, throw some of your questions in chat. So if we don't get to it in the presentation, we can always get to it at the end during the chat. But there is a Q&A that we have at the end. I'm going to take us through the first section, and we're going to talk about our team, our goal, talk a little bit about what we see leadership as, our process research, and then we're going to get into some key learning. So that's really the meat of what we're going to talk about. And then Nina's going to close with some guidelines and potential pathways. Okay, so I'm on our team slide, and as Nina said, we have three of us here. I think we were so pleased with our team on a lot of levels. We were pleased with the passion of our team members, and we always had such great, rich discussions. I think everybody really wants to make sure we get this right. And we also have a great deal of different experiences on our team. And so I think we've been able to pull from that experience and put together something that we think is some well-informed and strong recommendations based on both our experience and all of our learnings that we got over the last few weeks. So I'm not going to read every single person's sort of bio as it relates to leadership or retail, but you can get a sense for the varying levels of leadership and retail experience that we have. And Nina, if you want to add anything, or if anybody wants to add anything. Okay, so I'm going to go on to the next slide. So our goal, what we saw as our goal, was to determine the most effective leadership model that we could recommend for the Kingston Food Co-op, both in terms of a short term, because there's that kind of startup period where the store is opening, and I think it's a very intensive period of time, and then for a longer term period of time. And I think anytime you even look at companies, they're in that startup mode. Sometimes you have one leader at that company in the beginning, and then as it gets to be more stable in an organization, it moves to a different type of leadership. So we think there might be something like that happens as well. We felt it was really critical to be agnostic. We had a lot of opinions and different points of view, but we felt to start with, especially, we need to be agnostic. We needed to follow through our process and not really say, okay, we already kind of know where we're going with this, because that really doesn't make sense at all. So I think we did a good job, and Nina did a great job of just kind of making sure that we didn't just jump into recommendations before we had gone through the research, the interviews, and things like that. Finally, we really have to keep in mind that there are multiple stakeholders that are involved in whatever decision we make, and it impacts multiple stakeholders. So it's the workers, it's our member community, and it's the broader Kingston community, as well as our suppliers, farmers, and growers. So all that, I think, can be impacted and is influenced by the kind of leadership model that we end up recommending. All right. So what we see is leadership. So it's really the ability of an individual or a group of individuals to influence and guide followers or other members of an organization towards a mutual purpose. And I think that's a really important thing to say, that mutual purpose. So we have that shared purpose, but it's how do we get there in a way that's effective? There's a lot of literature on leadership. I mean, I've been actually involved in leadership for years in terms of studying it and trying to be a good leader myself. But there's quite a bit written on it and scholarship on it. And so these are some examples of the characteristic of a leader. And again, I won't read them all. I think what is important is that these change over time. You know, if you were to look at something like in the 70s or 80s, it was a much more dogmatic leadership style. And that was considered the right way to be a leader. I think today's leadership style is more empathetic. You know, there's words like emotional leadership and things like that. So treating others, you know, with empathy and the influence of others and things like that. These words and the source here are from the Center for Creative Leadership, which is a well-established leadership organization that has been around for about 50 years. And you know, this is from an article that they wrote. But definitely good leaders kind of bring out the best in their team members and really allow them to achieve the goals that they're trying to. All right. Again, any questions, let me know. As far as our process, we kind of broke it into 3 different steps in our process. So we conducted interviews, read literature. A lot of these interviews were done by maybe 1 or 2 or at most 3 of us at a time, which was sometimes good, so that we made sure we kind of checked ourselves and made sure we heard the right thing, or we heard the same thing from the people being interviewed. Then we summarized those things, and actually one of our team members who's here, Robert, was responsible for summarizing all our findings. And then once we had all that, we discussed what our recommendations would be. So that's where that point of not, you know, coming up with a recommendation until we had conducted all those steps. We wanted to make sure we were curious and thorough, respect the opinions of each other. And I think we have a team that really did that. We listened to each other. We, you know, we heard what people said, and it made us sometimes change our minds on things. So that's great. We did have a standard list of questions that we asked the retailers, so that we made sure that we were asking the retailers the same things. We didn't just ask one retailer one set of questions and then another. So we had that standardized and created a form. And then, yeah, this whole idea of don't make assumptions until the research and process is done. So to give you an idea of the research that we did conduct from left to right, first of all, it was the direct research with food co-ops and nonprofit organizations. So we interviewed 5 different co-ops. We interviewed also 2 nonprofit or academic experts. And then we had one natural food product store that we interviewed based on one of our team members' experience with that organization. We also, as everyone knows, we had the shared leadership workshop, and we attended that, and the 3 sessions involved. That was really informative and has helped to guide us in this process. And then we conducted secondary literature research. We had articles, case studies, you know, looked at different leadership models through some of that research. And then finally, we took advantage of the experience of our team members and the expertise that we have on our team. So I'm going to hand it off to Nina now for the next part.
Cool. Yeah. So one thing we just wanted to talk about was that shared leadership doesn't necessarily have one form or one definition. It really happens on a spectrum, and there's a lot of versions of what this can look like, and there can be more hierarchy and less hierarchy. And, you know, even saying like on one end, worker self-directed co-op is like the complete opposite, is not necessarily the opposite. We're just really trying to demonstrate how many different ways that this could look. So for example, on one end, you know, a traditional general manager, one person at the top, kind of like an executive director or a CEO or whatever, you know, top dog, and everyone kind of reports in a pyramid style to them. There's another version that we did some research around, which is still hierarchical, but takes a model of thinking more about a servant leader, which is someone who really thinks of being a leader as being accountable to and supporting the work of the people who might like report to you. So it's the bottom of the pyramid, the folks that are the frontline workers who have the direct experience, who really know what's happening on the ground, who are informing what someone in who they might be reporting to is actually doing. Their work informs people who might be traditionally seen as higher up on the pyramid. And then another version is where you share leadership between two GMs. And so it's still maybe hierarchical, but there's two different scopes of work, and there's, a lot of communication and clear delegation. But at the end of the day, it still might be kind of hierarchical, but just shared between multiple people to manage burnout, to make, the work of running like a really huge grocery store, not huge, but like a substantial store with a lot of community programming, and a lot of responsibilities connected to cooperative governance and, responsibilities to the members, to make that basically more reasonable, and to mean that it's more possible to find, for example, local folks who don't have to be a unicorn and have all the skills, but might have some of the skills, and balancing those different skill sets and experiences in one team of leadership. I'm not going to deeply explain, but sociocracy, another version of what shared leadership can look like. It can look like building circles. It can look like having different scopes of authority, and giving each circle like ultimate responsibility and accountability and authority over their bucket of work. And then there's also a worker self-directed co-op, which is basically a worker-owned cooperative where that allows all the workers to play an active role in management, not just kind of voting to elect management, who then makes all the decisions. So there's all this is to show there's a lot of versions of what this might look like. Brad, yeah, perfect. Thank you. So amongst the folks that we talked to, we wanted to kind of show a range of where folks landed. So for example, and also a lot of this changed over time as well. So I'll just give an example of Mariposa, which is a food co-op in Philadelphia. And they really started off as like complete shared leadership at a certain point, where they had, 7 different folks who were all in equal position, all had their scope of work and practicing shared leadership. And then they moved towards a co-GM model and then moved towards a GM model. So that's like one version of how an organization has changed over time. And Mandala Food Co-op in Oakland in California also, for example, shifted from being a very, very small team, and having complete shared leadership in terms of not having any kind of clear hierarchy or organizational structure, but everyone's expected to know everything. Everyone has a hand in everything. And they shifted towards a little bit less of that, where there's someone who kind of does back office work and doesn't do the exact same work, but at the end of the day doesn't necessarily hold more decision-making power, just has a different scope of work. And then on the flip side, you'll see in a large organization with hierarchical leadership, the East End Food Co-op as an example, that explored shared leadership, but ultimately landed with something more hierarchical. Zingerman's is an example of servant leadership, which I spoke on briefly, where it's really the culture and the values around leadership, even though there's technically a leadership structure and that's pretty traditional. But the way it actually operates in practice is that you don't have a top dog telling people how everything is done. You have the frontline workers and the people in the store shaping what the culture is and what the needs are, and have a lot of authority to like make a snap decision in the moment. For example, determine whether what is needed in response to a customer service need, not having to like go up the chain in order to get approval for making a decision that would respond to like a customer or community member's ask or need. So yeah, this is just to give you a sense of what are the kinds of organizations we connected with. And you'll also see some nonprofits, GWI, Kingston Land Trust, we talked to quite a few folks who have been a part of the nonprofits transition from being a more traditional nonprofit to being a nonprofit that is practicing shared leadership. And so, yeah, so there's some different versions there. Yeah, so those, yeah, I'm not going to dive too much into these, but just an example of a more hierarchical organizational chart of the Kingston Food Co-op, where you'll really see the general manager having oversight over these other managers who have a team of folks who report to them based on their kind of scope and department. And on a different end, here's an example of how the Good Work Institute works. A very small team, but really developing circles that have their own scope. And then all members are also part of this general circle where they make certain kinds of decisions that might affect the core of how the organization functions, or maybe has certain budget implications that would affect the whole team. So that's just another version of what that can look like. I think I'm passing this over to Robert here.
You are. Thank you. So I'm going to start referencing some of our key learnings. The first one there, the importance of clearly defined roles and responsibilities. I mean, this piece, along with the discussions we had about power and decision making, really was a constant throughout all of our research, no matter who we spoke to, particularly concerning opening a new entity and not dealing with an existing one. The GWI workshop, which I think everybody here was on, really did a good job of of defining the organization in three different areas. One is the policies, the framework that governs the organization. This is a piece that we can really be taking a look at prior to opening, and these are things that can change, but slowly and infrequently, and they focus on human resources and compensation. So you got the policies, then you have the practices, and this one is more like they're guidelines on the way that the team interacts with each other. And ideally, they're established by the team and help provide guidelines for decision making. This can take some time. And then the third piece, the culture. So you got the policies, you have the framework, you have the practices, you have how we deal with each other. And the culture is something that combined with the policies and practice, taking into account that human element, it takes time and a lot of trust to reinforce. And this piece of it is very difficult to address without the team in place. Brad, you want to move it on? Thank you. Co-op's values should be accompanied with policies that support it. And I think we need to remember that it's very difficult to have the values and live the values without policies to support it. And that's particularly important as we begin to define the policies for the store. I'm sure everyone here is familiar with our values, our mission, our vision. So I think we can move on to the next one. Okay. Important to clearly define practices and policies around decision making, and this was another one that we saw in most of our research. And it was this piece that I think GWI, it was the piece with GWI that most resonated with me, because it was one of the things that really sort of confused me or made me question how shared leadership really works. I liked their myth there of every decision is made by everyone, always using consensus. That's definitely a myth. The reality is we collectively decide how we want to make decisions and together have the authority to change it as needed. And there's a lot of different ways you can do it. You can use a decision-making matrix. You can have practices in place that ensure people at all levels of the organization have some sort of say into what's going on. And I think the last bullet point there, the transparency. This is a really critical piece, and I started that bullet point by saying from the outset, a defined and transparent decision-making matrix can be developed, taking all roles and all team members into account, further bending and developing as the organization finds its bearing. This can also support future departmental leads in being empowered to make decisions within their scope, mandate, and within a certain budget. Thanks, Brad. Shared leadership structures vary from organization to organization. I think Nina did a great job of sort of showing that continuum. But some of the points that came out in our research, particularly with those organizations that were working under shared leadership or moving to shared leadership or had been hierarchical versus shared leadership, ideally it should be designed by the staff. Because the truth of it seems to be that the best designed structure is really designed by the people and personalities that are a part of it. When hiring, discuss the expected leadership model direction. I mean, we're going to talk a little bit later about, you know, what our recommendations are going forward in the very short term here. But you know, my head goes back to the GWI shared leadership and leadership circles. And you know, one thing that Micah had said, I think when he was talking about how circles were defined, it was based on calling need and experience, and without the people in place to sort of facilitate that to happen, it's hard to do it ahead of time. Shared leadership can be slow and confusing at first. And this one is also a really critical piece, I think, because the shared leadership models take more time to establish. Certainly, they can be confusing at first and require a high level of mutual trust. You know, I was thinking about this earlier, and I worked in retail for a long time, and really only in one situation did I have a co-manager situation, but it worked really, really well. It was kind of a necessity in a market where the store was open 12 to 15 hours a day, and you needed a management presence and sort of decision maker in the store the majority of the time. And it worked really well, but in hindsight, I looked back at it and I thought, okay, the reason it worked really well, because really it was two people who had worked together as peers for a long time before moving them into that new market and having them do the co-manager experience. Next slide, experience in a retail food. This one, I think I'm turning over to Carrie.
Yep. All right. So this is something we learned in a lot of the interviews. Almost everyone said the same thing, that it was essential to have at least a person or people on the team who had experience in food retail. So let's see. Specific grocery experience is essential, especially at the startup. And some of the areas that would be really helpful to have someone in that position is like someone who understands purchasing budgets, margins, staffing needs, what kind of departments you might set up, where to source equipment, relationships with farmers, distributors, makers. And it doesn't need to be one person on the team. It could be, you know, half of the team with clearly defined roles. But the ones who had the biggest challenges, whether they used a traditional model of leadership or shared, were the ones who tried to start without that experience and train into the position. So that was something we learned. And then, yeah, general manager burnout is common and a real issue. Many GMs work 50 to 70 hours a week. A strong shared leadership team can really help balance that out. A good organizational chart in general, but shared leadership could really take the weight off of one person. All right. Next one. The next
We're there.
slide.
We're actually on the next one.
Oh, okay. Let's see. All right. So Yeah, clear and transparent expectations and culture setting is essential. Start establishing the culture at the beginning. So once we start, we advertise the job and we begin interviewing to make sure that the people that we're engaging and connecting with are interested in this type of culture and building it with us and learning and growing and being a part of a collaborative effort. Once the store is open, make sure to keep listening to and respecting the frontline workers. These are the people with the feet on the ground who experience day-to-day things that the management team won't necessarily be in touch with, and they need to be also paid for their time in a fair manner. And let's see, recognizing their expertise and value, compensating them fairly, providing a voice to shape the environment. That's something we keep talking about, how to bring this in so everybody has a voice. And that's something the circle model showed us that we could explore. And salary should be transparent and consistent with the co-op values. Specifically, we should develop parameters for the salary differential between top leadership and frontline staff. East End Co-op publishes all their salaries on their website in the job posting section. And recruiting leaders who are open to these models. It'll be an evolution. One of the things that we would be working on with people would be trainings in new modes of decision making, communication as a group, nonviolent communication. And one of the ways I think we could really lean on and get some support are other co-ops who are using these shared leadership models. The People's Co-op in Oregon offered to be there for consulting and helping us along the way and sharing materials, and even have people available to answer our questions. So let's see. Okay, whatever the initial leadership model is, there's an opportunity to baseline a culture of shared leadership and participatory decision making. Policies and practices combined with the human element that's contributed to by the team will become the culture of the organization. All workers, some of whom will be worker owners, should have a say in the trajectory of the organization. There should be safe, regular opportunities for them to voice their thoughts and make proposals for consideration. Opportunities should exist in many areas, including open book finance, rotating facilitator roles and team meetings, circles of team members that have mandates, scopes, budgets to build leadership and labor practices, mutual evaluation process and feedback, mentorship and leadership development opportunities should exist for all team members. Staff should feel that they have visible pathways to different roles and or leadership within the organization. One of the places that we interviewed, the People's Co-op in Oregon, every single person that's on their team is in their shared leadership. They have 25 people, all equal, and they do a 6-month training before they begin, and it's pretty amazing what they're doing. They have exactly the same pay for everyone, so that was a pretty interesting model, I thought. But that's where we are. I think I'm passing it on to who's next.
Robert, you're back.
Me, Robert. So Nina talked a little bit about servant leadership earlier, and I think it's, I was thinking as she was talking, it's a style, not a structure, I think. We were introduced to it by Corinna, who is another member of our committee that unfortunately couldn't be on the call, but she actually was exposed to it through working with Zingerman's at one point in her career. And if you really want to go down a rabbit hole, you can Google Zingerman's and start looking at some of their the things that they do. But it's a fascinating, very community-based store. Started out as a retail deli in the 80s, founded by a couple of recent U of M grads. And it's grown over the last 40 years into 10 different businesses, but all kind of interrelated. They have a deli, they have a bakery, they have a dairy, they have a restaurant, they have a catering business, and it's all stayed. They're treated as individual standalone businesses, but they're all under the Zimmerman's umbrella. And I think, servant leadership is, let me explain it another way. If you're looking at sort of a traditional leadership, I think in most organization, the leader's main focus is the driving and the thriving of the organization, I like to say. And a servant leader kind of does the opposite. Their focus is on helping people develop and perform as highly as possible. They share power. They put the needs of their workers as a priority. There's a wealth of material on Zingerman's there, and they also have a number of very sort of structured training elements. They actually have a servant leadership training business that both Shaniqua and myself actually attended a seminar on it and really found it interesting and fascinating. That's it. And the key learnings at a glance, I mean, here, these are just kind of the 8 that we just outlined previously. I don't need to read through them all again. But these were our top 8 key learnings.
Okay, all right, so then we thought we'd just pick out really just 3 different quotes, and I'm calling them quotes, but we're not sure they're verbatim right, so we're actually calling them insights. But essentially, they were from our notes from each of the different interviews that we had. And so the first one was with a large co-op. And one of the things they said is there are a lot of variables that matter to our store staff, not just the leadership model. Our employees are unionized, so they had that happen about 5 years ago. And they also want career tracks, good wages and benefits, and they like the idea of a general manager as the face of the store and somebody that obviously they can talk to and negotiate with, and to clarify accountability. So, so that's an interesting thought about what some of the values of having that one person as a single sort of face of the store. I'm going to pass it on to, I think Carrie is going to read the next one, or was it Robert?
I think Carrie stepped away. So I think we've kind of said this previously too. It's shared leadership should be installed by the people who are going to work under the model. Carrie talked a little bit about People's Food Co-op in Oregon. And if you look at their website, and that co-op has been around for, I don't know, 50 years, I think since the 70s. And they made a move toward shared leadership 35 or 40 years ago. So nobody that we were speaking to was around at that point in time. But the way that they phrased it on the website in the history was really interesting, because it said something to the effect of the team at that time found themselves thinking of themselves as managers of the store. It's something that happened organically with that group, and you can certainly put policies in place and push a group towards it, but it has to be instilled by them as well.
And we heard this quote actually at the shared leadership training from GWI. The shared leadership is hard, but so is hierarchy. One thing I will mention about, and I think Carrie said it, both Zimmerman's and People's talk about a fairly long training period in terms of learning this new type of leadership. So I think, like Carrie mentioned, a 6-month training period, and I think Zimmerman's has a 90-day training period for their new team members. So definitely that is critical. It's part of the whole enculturation of the staff. And then I'll pass it on to Nina for the last one.
Oh, the last quote or the last section?
The last quote and then the last section.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think another valuable insight that we got is that we cannot be the ones who design a perfect structure and then expect to roll out with that. So what is important to do, especially as we're in startup phase, is thinking about something that's manageable, that's realistic, that meets what our funding availability is, and finding the right people, the right team who will position us well to get started. And so this first round of hiring is incredibly important. We need to, communicate clearly what we're trying to build towards, even if there is some ambiguity or knowing that there will be some evolution. But it is still only the beginning point. And once the team comes on board and are getting settled and developing deeper relationships and themselves, receiving opportunities to learn and be exposed to different approaches of management, of decision making, of sharing power, of engagement and participation, and seeing what resonates with those folks, that will be the journey that we continue to build on. And so we have a few guidelines that we wanted to offer. One is to start with something simple and clear. Opening a food co-op, even if regardless of what structure you have, is a lot, and there will be a lot of unanticipated things popping up. And so wanting there to really be clarity on who is overseeing whichever scope they're overseeing. So there's not another layer of confusion on top of just quick moving things that are bound to happen. Another piece is that we would really recommend staying flexible. We think that the hiring process should begin and be responsive to who the applicant pool is. I think that it is important to be transparent in the job listing, what we're building towards, but also letting people know that that job description may shift depending on who the candidates are and what the role we end up scoping will be. And the compensation may be adjusted accordingly, though we should still just share what that defined range will be. And then another piece, of course, is acknowledging that budget is a key factor. So, when we come up with a vision of what the structure should look like, it's not in a vacuum. We have to be doing our due diligence and research to really figure out what is that going to look like. And so we'll talk about that a little more as we go into a few options of what this could look like. So one, obviously the most traditional is to have a, traditional GM structure. And there's ways to think about this where perhaps, we bring someone on as a consultant to really focus on opening the store and building the capacity of other managers or staff on the team. So, for example, if there are local candidates we find who may not have the exact skills to start a food co-op, to really be mentoring them and building them towards leadership. And also thinking of that could be an interim structure as well. Either way, this again goes back to really clearly developing roles and accountabilities and identifying how we want this consultant or interim GM to be sharing power, and also being clear what the pathway to leadership will look like over time. This is something that we definitely took away from some other co-ops' experiences with lack of clarity around that decision making. Of course, as I mentioned, a necessary step would be to review the pro forma. I think this bullet point actually is meant for the next slide, but in general, still reviewing the pro forma, thinking about what is affordable and feasible with getting a consultant, with having multiple folks in that leadership position, and how the store would, what the salaries would look like. So this is the co-GM structure. This is a version where it's a little more moderate risk compared to the very supposedly low risk version of going a very traditional route. And in this version, you would be splitting responsibilities. Huge benefit is less likelihood of GM burnout. As I mentioned, it's also an opportunity to bring in folks with different skill sets. And so, that allows us to hire more locally potentially if someone doesn't have the unicorn, whole package of, co-op experience, of, grocery retail experience, of startup experience. And so we can kind of really define scopes. And so one example is a potential co-GM scope that focuses on ops, finance, and planning, and another could be HR, marketing, community engagement, and integration. And the area of overlap in this Venn diagram would be liaising with the council, and overall, wellness of the co-op. And so as mentioned below, if we want to do this, we have to look at what that would look like in terms of the numbers. What would their salaries be, how to compensate them fairly, and also all the other workers and worker owners that we're expecting in the co-op as well. And so to also create those two scopes and share that with folks who are applying, so that they understand, I may not have this set of skills, but I do have these. And so I can still enter into this hiring process and have that full information. And so another version might be seen as higher risk. So it's starting with shared leadership right from the beginning. And if this is something that we want to do, it would be really important to bring the whole leadership team on in advance of opening and really allow there to be time to build trust and to be fleshing out shared leadership and what that looks like for them. Really understanding as people what their skills are, what their values are, and we might offer guidelines or values and a vision, but letting them work through what makes sense for that team. We think that would be a great opportunity for just group building in general. It would also be a professional development opportunity to be learning about these various things, these approaches to leadership, to decision making, to management and operations. It would also give the team just time to be working together to establish store culture. They can get to know each other's work styles, communication styles, gain skills around financial literacy, and learn other things about how to work together to run a business. And we would also offer them, the opportunity again to opt into and experiment with different things like creating a decision-making matrix, rotating facilitator roles, using committees, and so on. So all of that is to say, if anyone expected us to come and say, this is what you should do, we did not meet that, but we really see these different pathways as a continuum for different versions of what this can look like, while still really emphasizing that we should be infusing practices, tools that promote shared leadership, and then also look for leaders, look for managers who are invested in and open to sharing power. And so it's going to be a nuanced conversation, but I think that it can be a good foundation for a really cool workplace that shares power, not just in terms of helping folks build wealth and have good jobs, but also in shaping, leadership at this food co-op. I know we talked a long time, and I
Just
think
one
yeah.
quick comment. When we put higher risk, we saw sort of two different types of risk. So there's the financial risk of, in this recommendation, because it requires hiring a full leadership team prior to the opening, and we're talking about like 6 months prior to opening, there's going to be that 6 months of paying salaries without any revenue generated. And then the second thing would be the risk of just cultural risk is that the reality is that most people that we would be talking to would not be familiar with shared leadership. They would be more familiar with the traditional leadership model that we're all familiar with, whether it's the president of the United States or whatever. We're familiar with hierarchies. And so the risk around just trying to get this new culture to take place and occur in this 6 month time period. So those are sort of the two risks that we associated with this. And that brings us to Q&A.
Yeah.
I think there's a few things in the chat, right? Or no?
Yes.
Not particularly pertaining to.
Yeah. I just wanted to see, I know we're a bit over time. What do you all council members think is the best way to do Q&A? Like how should we keep going to make space for open forum as well?
I think that we could save it for open forum.
Yeah.
There's questions regarding to this, we can answer those during open forum time.
Okay, cool. And then for the committee, like we can keep the conversation continuing with the council and with any other folks who want to reach out and want to engage and talk about it as well.
Okay, well, first of
Thank
all,
you.
yeah,
So
thank you so much.
Lena, for leading that effort. And thank you everyone who was a part of that committee. It was great. Thank you all.
Yeah, I definitely just want to shout out all the research and work that this committee has done. So thank you all so much. And I believe the only committee left was finance, and Ali didn't quite get a chance to finish the report. So Ali, if you
Wait,
want to
Capitals Project and
Oh.
finance.
Capitals project, sorry. Is that first?
Yeah. It doesn't. Let me see.
Hey, so I logged into my phone. Can people hear me?
Mhm.
Yep.
So I'll do the finance. I finally have that thing up. The biggest update is, yeah, as I mentioned, the Q4 grant request 286,500 has been sent out, and it's pending approval with GWI. The general context, they hold the money in the time frame that we've established right now is to ask it via in quarters that have been identified per the budget, the projected expenses, and we request that amount. And then with GWI, there's a justification essentially on like what money we're asking to in a narrative form, and then they approve, and that happens. So that started another procedural thing. Our bookkeeper that we've been working with as part, I guess this could go under the umbrella of further cementing processes of the co-op, finally under an agreement form, which was tied to the process that our consultant, Sonia, our operations consultant, Sonia Narvaez, helped with governance to create a format on how to, like a checklist format on how to make sure that documents, contracts, agreements are per procedure. So I would say that was implemented during this, which is great. And the other main things, well, the balances, as you see there, that's what we currently have. The member equity, don't have that. It was minor slip up. I didn't talk with Siobhan earlier, but that number can be updated and is, I believe, it's updated on the website. The last things for the year, start transition of the treasurer role, my role out as the 1-year commitment is coming to an end, with new members either in the committee or other members of the co-op, and present finance findings of my time here. Yeah, that's pretty much the update of finance.
Thank you, Ali. And yeah, I don't know who's reporting on the Capitol building project.
Yeah, Capitals project. Lindsay is away this week. She's our shepherd for this, but okay, I'm in all the meetings too. So the Capitals project, what we worked on is the CIC work with Mass, who's been hired under the Capitals project team, to do the Design Your Co-op event. Baxter completed the 4 estimates for our space. So that is just basically the cost per square foot to build it. I told you all there's a small, medium A, medium B, and a large model. So they completed all 4 estimates to know the cost per square footage of all of those and how much it costs to build it. And we continue to work on the legal side of the parking lot usage situation conversation, just to bring you all up to speed. Right now, we don't own the building, nor do we own the parking lot. However, we need X amount of parking spaces to accommodate sort of like the traffic for the Kingston Food Co-op. And we also, if we want to go forward with any of the things that we have that that impede onto the rest of the parking lot, we have to have some legal understanding around what we can and can't do with it. So we've retained a lawyer, and they're working with our Capitals project manager along with Lindsay and myself and Sonia everyone who's involved in that process and the architects on making sure we come to a legal understanding on that. So goals for next reporting period are continuing discussions around the best time to transfer building ownership. We want to make sure we have the finances in place. We want to make sure we have the legality and safety and everything in place before we own the building, and make sure we have a civil engineer who could work on the building with our architect too. And then commence the schematic design phase. So after the pre-design phase, once we sort of like have it arranged that we're going to go down, we start designing operations to it so that we can get a clearer number as to what that's going to be, not only operations, but also the capitals project piece of it too. Complete the construction project budget for the co-op building. So that's a part of it. So all of this stuff come together to create one big budget. Preparing on-site visit with grocery store consultant in November. So Firebrand is coming up in November to view the space, also touch base with us as a council and all the things we need, don't need, X, Y, and Z. And so we're looking forward to that, and working in development and programming team to prepare a presentation to secure funding. So that's what we're doing right now. So all of these schemes come together along with the community input, along with the different conversations I've been having with different organizations around partnerships, along with some of the other stuff, which I'm happy to get into also. I see some questions in the chat around it, around sort of like partnerships that we hope to build with the local bodegas and ways to make their products cheaper. All of that stuff comes together for a big presentation on what the co-op is going to look like. Committee expenses this period. So there's $10,200 for the capitals project manager. That's Susan Wallace, who has been helping us with every single thing, you know, taking us through this whole challenging field that is developing a building. And then there is the mass design firm, who is our architect. That's how much they charge for the pre-design phase. And then there's Firebrand, who's helping us with all the operational pieces. They've been a tremendous help on just ensuring that we have the proper things in place for them to do their work in schematic design. And then there's the lawyer. Yeah, we all love lawyers, huh? Yeah, so yeah, that's where we are, the Capitol building project.
Okay, thank you, Kivius. So is there new business to discuss? I don't see any here. So, okay, in that case, we are entering our open forum, and I would love to start that by also addressing some of these concerns in the chat, because I very much so hold these same concerns, and I'm really glad that it's getting brought up now, because I do agree that this should happen conversations with local orgs. I've actually brought it up before, the other local businesses and grocery stores on Broadway and just in the surrounding area, that we need to make sure that we get in conversation with them prior to breaking ground and setting definite program plans, so that we can make sure that we are not impeding or taking business away, and that we're actually working together to fully be able to flourish as a community and an economy. And I do think that's really important. So I am glad that you all brought that up again. And lucky for us, I mean, everyone on the council here, I know them professionally and personally, all have the intention of doing this so that this can be a community owned and operated grocery store that actually is beneficial to the space that it's in and is not harmful to the outside community. We all work for nonprofits and community organizations. This is each and every one of our life's missions. So we are totally on the side of not doing, this whole business isn't for a profit. We already know co-ops are not profitable. And if there is a profit, it gets split back to between 1,200 people, which are the owners, all of you, the members, and us. So just to be clear on that. And also, Jordan and or Chris, if either of you are willing to or are available to join us in those conversations or help us facilitate those conversations, if you know some of these business owners personally, I think that'd be really awesome and help us to start the conversation in a good and mutually beneficial way. I'm the chair of the Community Integration Committee. So I'll put my email here. If you want to send your emails, I'll also reach out to you if that was okay, but I'll put my email here and you can reach out to me. I would love to set up these conversations with the businesses that surround the building that the co-op plans to be in. And yeah, we are open for open forum. So I saw a question, who is the capital project manager? So
I think that was more of a play on the capital.
Oh.
So we have a capital project manager. There's no capitalist project manager.
No, I want to. That was a typo, but it kind of fits. But I was just wondering who it is and what, like, they're getting $10,000. So I'm just like, that's why I'm curious, like, what's up with that? That's a lot of money. So maybe it's worth it. I'm just curious who it is and what's up.
Oh yeah, no worries.
Maybe you said it and I missed it, but yeah.
Yeah, her name
That's
is
why.
her name is Susan Wallace. And she has done a lot of different not-for-profit buildings, along with schools, along with everything, just guiding folks through the process who've never been on the process before, especially community members, and to making sure that, like, hey, when we navigate the architects and we navigate civil engineers and we navigate, all these folks, we know sort of like what we're bringing to the table, and that we're not getting, played, for our money. So yeah, she's our owner representative. She's represented so many different organizations across the nation, especially in New York City, and a lot of different not-for-profit missions and schools.
Okay, so I'm going to go in order of this stack. There was a question in here for the store leadership committee, which was, did the size of the community and the co-op matter in terms of who you spoke with? An example for the leadership model.
Yeah, we definitely, okay, just in terms of like, did it matter? Did it matter when we were choosing who to talk to? Not necessarily. We talked to as many people as were willing to speak with us and who had some kind of connection to shared leadership, even if it was that they considered it and decided against it. So we had, small co-ops, and then we also had large co-ops or businesses. So we had a range. In terms of the outcomes of what we learned, definitely smaller organizations and smaller co-ops had an easier time with not having as clearly with not having a more traditional or hierarchical model. But I feel like in those smaller co-ops, actually what we found was that they didn't tend to have very clearly defined roles. It was just more of a free-for-all. So they would just say, there are no roles, there is no hierarchy, instead of being like, here is how authority and power is shared very explicitly. And so we found that to be a gap, and with the more struggling cases, that was typically what happened. They just had no leadership, and instead of just like, everyone has a scope and everyone has power, if that makes sense. I don't know if anyone else wants to add to that.
Yeah, I think that two really interesting examples on opposite ends of the spectrum are the East Side, which was a Pittsburgh co-op. It's a large co-op. It's about $12 million in revenue. And they had a traditional hierarchical organization. As I said, they were unionized. So their union actually felt very comfortable having a store manager to talk to, and to, if they have any grievances or concerns, to have sort of one face of the store as a key person that they can interact with. So that was at one end. I think People's is at the other end, where People's, I think we mentioned after an early few years, they decided to go with a shared model, some sort of shared worker co-op model, and it has worked. But I think, to what Nina said, the reason why it has worked is they were committed to it, and they built a whole decision-making model around it. We mentioned the 6-month training period that they go through. So I think both ends of the spectrum can work, but I do think even what we learned in the shared leadership training with GWI, if you're going to do shared leadership, you really have to sort of get people ready for it, train them on it, build culture, build trust. And so, Nina talked about us not making one recommendation, but the reality is that for a store opening period where it's hectic and stressful, we did all land pretty much on the feeling that starting off with a shared leadership model will be, we think, adding an additional layer of challenge. And so we put that as a high risk option. If we think we should do it, we really need to put in place the culture and the trust and the time, but we think it could be a high risk option, and that more of a co-leadership or consultant, working with a store manager is a lower risk choice.
Thank you, Brad. So I just want to let everyone know we are limited on time. We're ending at 7:30, so definitely try to keep questions and answers concise. Callie, did you wanted to be on the stack?
I think Jordan was on. I don't know if Jordan finished.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not done. All right, I'm just gonna speak. I don't really have a specific question right now. I'm gonna read the core values. We commit to maintaining and institutionalizing leadership that is representative of the Kingston community, and especially BIPOC, the LGBTQI community, and other underrepresented people. We stand in solidarity with anti-racism and anti-oppression movements. Now I'm going to jump to the accountability. We create opportunities for our co-op community to hold leadership accountable for adhering to these values. With that being said, with that value, when people's cauldron was in the lot, concern was about paperwork from the co-op. Tents came down from Novo. Co-op said nothing. Council said nothing, as people got arrested for putting tents up for homeless folks and folks who use the back lot. Nothing was done materially to help, and no questions was asked of Novo. Fast forward to recent situations, cops were called by somebody at people who were requesting and trying to get the tents back, get tents, co-op tents, to be put in the back of the lot. The cops were called. Kevius and other council members watched as that happened and then defended it afterwards. So I'm not sure how, solidarity with anti-racism and anti-oppression movements has not been contradicted by those actions, by one, not supporting and the tents when they got taken down, the arrests and all this, as well as the cops being called. So I'm not sure, I'm curious what you guys are going to do about that. So I have a couple proposals, and, I guess one thing would be, since, some of us have put tents up and they've been taken down, and we've lost 3 of them from that on a faulty city violation. So one, for the co-op to get 2 10x10 tents or 1 10x20 tent to temporarily take care of the folks back there. The second, which I'm not going to go into detail right now, is a proposal for that back building to be passed along and transferred to either the People's Cauldron or the Community De Facto project, completely autonomous from the co-op and Novo. And 3, an in-person meeting for the next co-op meeting, because this Zoom thing is very prohibitive and I think does not foster cooperation. And my last thing is just a question. Why is the building still not transferred to the food co-op? And like what? So that's my least important question. So please don't focus on that. Those 3 proposals are real proposals that I would like a response from, and any comments from people who are just members as well.
So I would like more information, especially because I wasn't there on Saturday, about the tents. You said that your own tents were taken down?
Not on Saturday. Weeks previously, tents that had been put up have been taken down by Novo, citing a faulty city violation. And so there was some pressure put on folks from the co-op after the meeting to put the tents in the back. And they refused. And then it escalated and turned into a situation where the cops were called by the diner people. And yeah, and I think, there was some disappointment. Kevius just sort of let that happen, and other council members didn't say anything like, oh, don't call the cops, we'll get this figured out. There was complicity in that. And so that was like a problem. And so since those tents are sitting in an empty building and there's people on the streets who could use them, I think the least that the co-op could do is now get some tents. So that's.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. Well,
So what is
I wish that we could speak for Novo, but we can't.
well, I just want to make sure I understand the specific questions so we can address them. So I heard maybe 3 questions. There was one on the proposal, one concerning the event, and then I believe the last one concerning the backspace, or I guess that ties into the proposal, or us being complacent in something. I just want to make sure I capture the right questions to respond to.
The first one is the co-op council. There's enough council members here to just decide that they're going to get some tents and put them back there.
Oh, okay.
That's what I'm asking for. That's the first one. It's
Yeah,
just,
let's hone in on that one. So on the general umbrella of resources for folks at the co-op, I think, and I love that you use the language of proposal, because I think that's I mean, I love that step, because it means that we could come to something, we deliberate on it, we could decide together. I think the main thing that I've been communicating to everyone involved in this is, yeah, let's just all get on the same page as the resources, let's take them through, and let's make sure we're not putting folks in a situation that can put them in harm's way of themselves or the greater community. And what are the complementary things that we could do, such as, like, are there folks in harm reduction that are visiting back there all the time? Like, you know, how long is it, like, what is, there's just a lot of more questions to this. So I open invite, yes, bring your proposals. I'm more than happy to, like, look at them and, you know, talk through them. But I think the biggest key is I just want to make sure we're holistically approaching the resources for folks back there. But I do appreciate the fact that you're using a language of proposal, which, you know, gives us something open to dialogue with. And I'd be more than happy to follow up with next steps on addressing that proposal once we sort of, like, talk as a team and coordinate schedules and get everyone on board.
hold on a second. How many council members here? Is there quorum to vote on getting tents? Yes or no?
Well,
Why is
that's
this turning into a whole big thing?
well, the big thing is
Like,
it's not-
I'm asking for this as a proposal to be addressed right now because there's quorum.
Yeah, so typically the way that we do proposals is we come in and we fit it into everything else that we have. So right now is sort of like a separate thing. We haven't deliberated as a council. We haven't gone through the nuances of it. We haven't put anything to it. So again, I'm willing to take it back, to process the proposal, us to come on common ground on what we can provide, and then roll it out in a voting manner from there.
Yeah, and on time, you know, message received, we want to make sure the other members can talk. So I know
not done,
I have some
but-
questions.
So that's a no.
All
You're
right.
not, you guys are not going to decide tonight about getting a tent. Is that yes? So I can move on to my next
No,
thing?
we're not going to decide on that right now. And Jordan, I really think also, I mean, because of the time, again, that you shared your 3 points. If there's more points that you want to share for us to review,
You haven't addressed
you know,
them
you
yet.
could send them in an
all of them.
email.
I'm not sending
What
in
was
an
that?
email. This is already alienated enough. All right, move on to the second one. The tents. You're not getting a tent. Got it. All right, we'll figure out when that is. The second one is about the proposal for the building and the in-person meeting next week or next month. I don't know which one you want to address first, but I would actually probably hear about the proposal. Initial thoughts. I know this is not the first time you all have heard about it.
So again, on the proposal, the best that we could do is everything other community members, especially.
Kevius, I don't want to hear you. I want to hear other people.
That's not how. That's
You know,
not how.
Jordan, you know, excuse me,
But
I
y'all-
think we have to keep a line of respect here. And I think, you know,
Yeah.
I understand the
Oh.
situation is frustrating for everyone right
It's
now,
not
but I think,
personal against Kevius. I've heard him talk about this. I never
But-
see all y'all. You guys, I don't know y'all, so I want to hear what your thoughts are. This is like not me being a jerk thing.
So feel free, anyone, to offer their thoughts after I complete mine. Let's not cut each other off. So with respect to the building, as all infrastructure,
done.
we have to capture it just as we capture everyone other thoughts, and it has to be deliberate, it has to be intentional, and everyone has to be behind it. So it's not ruled out, nothing is ruled out. We're saying whatever is to be done is it has to be rolled into all types of decision-making that we do, which requires the whole community and deliberate intentional actions. So again, I'm happy to process the proposal. Anyone else, feel free to add your thoughts to this.
Okay,
Yes, please. I would really like to hear somebody else's thoughts.
so thankfully Nina said she wrote down the proposals. So that means that we are able to actually look at them and use them in conversation. I think that one, the tents and the in-person meeting are something that we'll be able to discuss easily in our next council meeting. The building will probably take more discussion and more work, but I definitely think those are things that we can work towards, that we can talk about and put on our agenda to work something out about those proposals and get back to you on. And I would like to pass it to Callie if Callie would like to still speak quickly before we close out.
Okay,
So I would like to,
while we're talking about it and while we're talking about it and discussing it, nothing's being solved out there. There's still people lying their heads in the dirt, and it's probably going to rain between now and the next time they get a canopy. Like, it doesn't end for them.
I don't think that's where the organization to assist.
I can't believe we're even still talking about this.
There are most definitely other organizations that are more suited in assisting with this type of thing, whose mission is to do this type of thing. In terms of the tents getting taken down that you all put up, I think that is a shame and wasn't up to us. In terms of trying to get you all new tents, that's something that we can work on and work towards.
There's a couple of tents in the co-op, I think, right now. Y'all have the capacity to spare a tent. I mean, we're poor and we're losing tents, and we still keep finding them and putting them up, and they get taken down. I know that's not y'all, but y'all could help us.
So
Speak up.
I think, and I also want to go back to Callie because we didn't hear their thoughts. But when it comes to addressing the issue of folks needing somewhere to stay like now, there are two understandings that I carry with this. One, that there are legal, legal reasons why tents can be up, but then two, it's if we want folks to have a dry place to lay their heads, I'm more than happy to jump out and set up something that get folks to different local shelters, or if they need other resources, rehabilitation or whatever the case may be, just let me know. I can make the call. And if folks are back there too. And during our event, I also have folks in harm reduction check back with the folks back there to ensure they were well taken care of. So there are a lot of different ways to provide that care. I think the most forward proposal that is coming from you all is a tent. And there are other ways too. I just think we just have to explore. We can go down any route that's necessary and immediate. But right now, it doesn't seem like that's the most immediate solution. And then there's Callie.
so I'm just going to jump in quickly and just respond to this tent piece too, just for 1 second. And I'm going to ask my question, and I appreciate you all like keeping this open because you all went over and the Q&A time is like really, really small. But we have shared for weeks that the city violation that was cited that keeps forcing, quote unquote, forcing Novo to take the tents down is referencing tents that are either 400 square feet or 10,000 square feet. These were 10 by 10 tents that continually are taken down again and again and again. And we've shared that information with you all again and again and again. And so the fact that you keep citing that, there's a legal reason why you can't do this is just showing your lack of concern for the fact that people who are behind the home of the future Kingston Co-op are being displaced. What I want to say, specifically, and this is very much connected to my question, as one of the early members, as someone who was at an organization that recruited members for the food co-op, as someone who has also attended the GWI Shared Leadership Workshop, and as someone who has transitioned an organization to a worker self-directed nonprofit, I completely agree with what Brad said earlier. I think it was Brad or maybe Robert about needing policy that actually support the values. And right now, there's no policy that are supporting your values. And we are seeing council members that are making decisions that are not in line with the values, which make it really, really hard for us to trust that any decisions going forward are going to actually be in line with the values. So while you're talking about, we're going to make decisions, we're going to do this clearly, we are seeing again and again and again. And I do want to actually name really violent situations that Kivius has been perpetuating in this process, which makes it very, very, very hard to trust the co-op in any decisions that are moving forward. And so there are members of this organization, many of whom I recruited in early days because y'all were concerned that you didn't have Black and brown members of your food co-op, that need to have the full information and full understanding of what is happening in the back of the co-op. And all people are getting is this PR machine message that you all are putting out about, well, we have to take it down. We had to allow it to come down because of this city. And there's nothing we can do about this. There's nothing we can do about that. But there are currently members of the co-op who are not allowed to be on the co-op grounds. There's tents that are being taken down again and again and again, and citing these bogus laws, which our county legislators know about. The mayor has said that he knows that the building department is putting forth these, violations, and they're incorrect, which are consistently siding with landowners in order to push people out. But he can't, quote unquote, do anything about it because of union. But you all are the future owners of this. And actually, this is the first time tonight is the first time that I heard anyone from the co-op say that it's a shame that the tents have come down. Every other conversation has been, well, there's nothing we can do about it. We all have to agree whether or not we're okay with displacing people. And this double speak thing that keeps happening from Kivius and from Lindsay is really disgusting and really disappointing. And so my question, as we're looking at all of this, is how are we actually, as members, going to make sure that the members know what's going on so that the members can make decisions? Because I keep hearing that there's this decision-making process, but really what it seems like is that Kivius answers a question in this fancy way, like he wants to be a politician, and we are not actually getting things to the members so that the members can make decisions. There is no policy that is explaining how you all are making these decisions and saying that you are okay with Novo, who I understand is your funder. And I understand we are in this really weird situation in Kingston where Peter Buffett owns everything, but this is violence. This is state violence that you all are co-signing in this moment by taking away people's coverage, by displacing people, by allowing people to be arrested, by physically actually holding somebody into a door while we're trying to discuss things about tents, by saying it's okay that people are going to call cops on their behalf. This is violence, and this is not in line with your values, and is really sickening. And so how are we actually going to make sure that the members can hear the truth about what is happening in this moment so that the members can make decisions about this? Because if this is how the co-op is starting, this is wrong. And I'm sorry, I do not want to hear this answer from Kivius. He has been so respectful in this whole process.
Thank you, Callie. I hear you. I think hopefully we all hear you. And the question that I heard the most times, which I am also curious of the answer of, is how to connect with the rest of the members. So I am wondering if do we have a way for the members to email the rest of the membership or something like that? Do we not have like a mass, are we allowed to have like a mass list or something like that where members are? Okay, it seems like we don't have it.
Are you asking us, the council? I
As
mean, you're asking
people who might know, yeah.
So I mean, from a co-op perspective, or just an organizing perspective, the base is, we as members can, get together with other like-minded individuals and create a change. That I believe the forms that exist officially, this being the meeting that, again, is recorded, if not a Facebook group, or just even with fellow members, like, hey, this is not going down, or this is going great. Let's get together and talk through, as like from an organizing co-op perspective. So again, the official medium is the this meeting. I do, and then just general organizing with other fellow members to apply pressure and again, positively or just in any other way, I think is the two mediums available.
How can
Yeah,
we get
and
that
generally,
list as members?
Yeah, that's the thing. How in order to reach
well,
out, how would they know who else is a member?
yeah, I was more, maybe not, because in my experience, it's not like, this is a new territory too, but like, hey, give us what's general membership list. I was more thinking like, if you know other co-op members, and be like, hey, this is what's up, like neighbor or friend,
Yeah,
like
I mean, I think
organize
the more
against this.
straightforward thing also is if someone is trying to lead gathering a group of members and would like to, you know, would like the co-op to send an email blast and say, you know, all folks want to meet at this point at this time, or all folks should, you know, review, like that's a thing that we can do if members are asking to create a gathering or like a working group or something. That's something that of course the council will help facilitate getting people together. So, you know, while I don't think that it's appropriate to like give out an email list of people if they signed up specifically for one thing, I think we can definitely send an email blast and let people know if there is a group of folks who want to organize a meeting and start making a proposal and be a part of that process. So I think that is a totally valid step that can be taken. If someone wants to take the lead on that, please reach out and let us know.
Thank you. So I can reach out to, would it be Kendall or Nina to, you know, create some sort of blurb and get people to get in contact with us?
Yeah, I'm also wondering, do you think a Facebook group would be good, Kelly? I think a Facebook group that is open to just members would probably be a good idea.
I mean, I know there is a Facebook group, and also I believe that the Facebook group is not great. You know, I mean, as a longtime organizer, you know, some people can be reached on Facebook, some people need to be phone banked, some people need to be, you know, emailed outreach, and so. I mean, even, and we can talk about this more, you know, in terms of how we actually communicate with people and how we actually organize with folks in order for it to be just sending out an email blast. I'm not even getting emails anymore as a co-op member, and I've updated my email many times. And so I think that if we're actually talking about a just way to include and actually talk to all the members and let them know and share this information, talk about our concerns and share the information, it needs to be more than just a blast. But I'm glad that we're heading in the direction where you all are understanding that like members should be able to speak to members about concerns to make sure that it's not just council leadership that is sharing all the messaging about any concern that is happening. And so would it make sense to then to reach out to Kendall? Was I seeing you were the,
because
Okay.
Siobhan will have that information of all the members, so I can talk to her about it, about getting that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, everyone. Thank you all for your open and honest comments, and we have it all written down so that we can continue to discuss it and work on it all together. So thank you for joining us tonight, and we will be reaching out to some people, and I hope you all have a great night.